apologize in advance if my recommendations are all over the place, but your four favorites are all so different. Your four favorites are Next Stop Greenwich Village, Raising Arizona, The Silence of the Lambs, and Jaws. It feels like cheating to recommend a movie that hasn't been released yet, so I'll throw in a couple extra recommendations to make up for this one. But I usually try to connect at least one movie to all four favorites, and I can't lie, the first movie that came to mind when I tried to do that this time was Marty Supreme. And don't worry, I can explain why without spoilers. Like Next Stop Greenwich Village, it's got an unlikable protagonist who's a Jewish man living in New York City navigating his relationships and ambitions. Like Raising Arizona, it's a blend of comedy and crime. At times, it has a bit of a cat and mouse dynamic like The Silence of the Lambs. And even though it's not a horror movie like Silence of the Lambs, there's a scene that combines two of my personal biggest fears into one, so I feel like that's gotta count for something. And like Jaws, it's a stressful thriller. But I keep comparing Marty Supreme to After Hours, which is a movie you didn't have marked as watched, so I think you should check that out. It's got the artsy and neurotic New York City bohemian vibe of Next Stop Greenwich Village. Like Raising Arizona, it combines elements of screwball comedy with crime. It sort of has that cat and mouse dynamic of Silence of the Lambs, or at least it feels like someone is being hunted and there may or may not be a murder involved. And like Jaws, it's stressful watching the protagonist trying to escape from dangerous situations. The Night of the Hunter is a thriller like Jaws, but also technically a horror film about a serial killer like The Silence of the Lambs. But the real reason why this one came to mind is because it's referenced in two of your favorites. In Raising Arizona, the line, "Sometimes it's a hard world for little things," is almost a direct quote from this movie. And Buffalo Bill has the word love tattooed on his hand, which I believe is an homage to one of the characters in this movie. Plus, this movie features one of the stars of Next Stop Greenwich Village, Shelley Winters. Something Wild has a similar tone to Raising Arizona, but it's from the director of The Silence of the Lambs. I feel like people would expect me to compare Next Stop Greenwich Village to Woody Allen's work, but if I'm going to recommend another neurotic Jewish New York movie, I'm going to go with Crossing Delancey. Pauline Kael described Next Stop Greenwich Village as Paul Mazursky's Amarcord, and it wasn't one of the first films that immediately came to mind for me, but I think it makes sense, and if you like all the eccentric characters in Greenwich Village, then I think you might enjoy this one. The Big Chill came to mind because like Next Stop Greenwich Village, it's got an ensemble cast including Jeff Goldblum, and it delves into some similar themes. With Next Stop Greenwich Village, I kept thinking about coming-of-age films about young adults who are either in college or already graduated from college, mainly ones involving a group of friends or that are about aspiring artists or writers. And some of the films that came to mind that seem up your alley are Reality Bites, Diner, Metropolitan, Mistress America, Party Girl, Listen Up Philip, and Shithouse. One of the first films I thought of when I was watching Next Stop Greenwich Village was Next Stop Wonderland, and I was so sure it was because both films depict young adults trying to figure their lives out. But then I wrote it down and realized maybe I subconsciously thought of it because of the similar titles. The fact that you love Next Stop Greenwich Village made me want to recommend more movies with artsy characters. So I kept thinking about movies that take place in art schools, but those tend to be hit or miss. So then I started thinking of movies about artists and aspiring artists in general. And I noticed I wrote down 3 Terry Zwigoff films, so I feel like I should include at least one of them. Art School Confidential is the first one that popped into my head, but I feel like Ghost World is the safest bet. But my gut says you'd like Crumb the most, even if it doesn't quite fit the vibe. Since Next Stop Greenwich Village feels like a smaller, intimate, dialogue-driven film, I could see you being a fan of What Happened Was, and especially My Dinner with Andre, because one of the characters is a struggling actor and playwright, like some of the characters in Greenwich Village. I wrote down a lot of crime comedies since you like Raising Arizona, but I think you'd have fun with Logan Lucky, Some Like It Hot, and A Fish Called Wanda. The book The Silence of the Lambs is the sequel to Red Dragon, and I know you've already seen the movie Red Dragon, but the novel was also adapted into the 1986 film Manhunter, which I believe you didn't have marked as watched. If you love the serial killer investigation aspect of The Silence of the Lambs, I think you'd enjoy Cure. And Sorcerer, like Jaws, is a stressful film that depicts a life or death situation involving a body of water and stars Roy Scheider.